let's just welcome folks to celebrating Black stories. This is in honor of Black History Month, um, February, and I want to share. I put together a PowerPoint to kind of guide us through. Can we see it? Oh, let's do this. Let's do this. Okay, that's a little bit better. So this is a book that came out last year, actually 22. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I have a agenda I'd like to propose. First, just introduce ourselves, whoever's here, and there's a talk about why we're doing this. Give a little bit of background about the book because since this is the first meeting and it was just announced like last week, I'm kind of guessing that people haven't read it yet. And we put in a promotion that you don't have to have read the book. So I'm thinking we'll talk a little bit about the book and share just some background on this particular denomination, the Afro-Christian Convention. Share a couple of quotes to get us thinking. And then the authors of the study guide have recommended Bible verses. And then hopefully that can lead us into a little bit of a discussion as folks join in. Does that agenda sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, so what I was going to propose for the welcome is, of course, welcoming everybody. Ask folks to share their name and if you'd like to share your pronouns. If you want to share, if you have any involvement here or within the denomination, feel free to share that. And just curious what is bringing people to this particular study. So I'm going to go on a little bit. So I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, I'm just like Christy. My pronouns are she, hers. And we just joined as members of this church. And I joined the care team recently.
Okay.
And then what brings me to the study, I'm interested in Black history and the topic, especially as a Black woman. And I'm new to being involved in the United Church of Christ.
Okay.
I grew up United Methodist. I went to a Presbyterian church where I used to live, and I work in Christian higher education right now.
Oh, okay.
So I was curious on the topic and wanted to learn more.
Great, great. As folks join in, maybe we'll get them to share too. But my name is Benjamin Wood. Ben is fine. I use he and him. I have been coming here for about a year or so, and mostly coming to the Bible study. But I did go to the new member class several months ago. And after that, Pastor Jacob sent me an email inviting me to join as a member. And I was like, wait a minute, I need to do a little bit more research. And so I feel like I'm kind of like interrogating. Oh, here comes my sister. Interrogating the denomination. And so I was looking at the UCC has press, an editorial house. I think they have two, but and so I was looking at the website, just looking for resources, and I saw that this book was like right on the top because it had just come out. So like, this is perfect. It'll help me have an entryway in to getting a little bit more of an understanding. Hi, sister. And I have this problem where I kind of do research backwards. I'm always reading the correctives first and then going back and reading the mainstream history. So this is like really fit into that. So I bought the book and I read it and I was like, oh, this is really interesting book. And so then when Black History Month rolled around, the press sent out a email saying, hey, we put together this study guide. It's for Bible studies or groups that want to read it. It's going to be really helpful. So I wrote Pastor Jacob. I said, hey, has anybody brought this up to you? You know, this looks great. I just read it. He said, no, but if nobody wants to lead it, then we don't really do book clubs. I'm like, I'll do it. So I hope it's not presumptuous. Because I am not Black or African American. I'm not an expert in the history of the denomination or of Black theology at all. It's just, so I don't intend to, lecture. I'm really hoping that we can help each other, learn and understand some of the themes in this book and beyond, because people bring, everything when they come into a study group. And although today, since I figured probably most people hadn't read it, we would just do a little bit more. I'd probably have to do a little bit more like lecture style. So that's what brings me. But yeah, I'm like I said, I have I'm a big book collector and reader. I sometimes do book reviews on YouTube, and I've been studying Black history for many, many years. It's one of my passions. So, Marina, I don't know if you're available. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah. Why can't I see myself?
Probably because I'm sharing screen.
Oh, okay. That's
I'm
okay.
sure.
I'm just seeing myself. Hi. Thank you for hosting this book club. Good job for organizing and having slides and everything and reading an entire book. Uh, I am Ben's sister, Marina. I'm a counselor at Cal State San Bernardino, like a mental health counselor. And I'm also actually a professor, believe it or not. I teach in the graduate program for counseling. And I'm a mom. I have two toddlers. Um, my brother has a toddler right in between my toddlers. So I have a 3-year-old, and then 6 months older than my 3-year-old is Ben's son, and then I have a 4-year-old. What else? I live in Upland. I go to CUCC. I have not read the book. I'm just here. That's all.
And you lead the trivia ministry.
Right. Trivia minister. I never heard it said that way. Yeah, monthly at CUCC. We have a blast. It's something that I enjoy greatly, and I love bringing it to CUCC and everyone else. You know, if I say so myself, has shared that they also enjoy it greatly. I get a lot of great feedback afterwards. I'll get like a email here or there just saying, "Oh, this is the most fun I had all week," or things like that. So I just love it. So yeah, that's all.
And when does the trivia ministry meet?
Well, it's monthly on different dates, but this, if you happen to be watching this before our next date in March, then trivia takes place March. I want to say it's 15th. I'm almost positive. Let me double check.
It is.
No,
We're
is
getting
it?
confirmation that it is.
Okay, yeah. March 15th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the Louise Roberts room.
This same room. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Care to introduce yourselves? You don't have to tell your life story like Marina did.
I know, seriously. My name is Zoe. Ben is also my brother. And Marina is my sister. And I am the junior high instructor here. And I'm here and here to support my brother and learn about this. I'm excited. I also have not read the book. And then, my name is Luz. Hoping to be a little bit more coming in the service. I'm looking forward to finding out his other branch release. Sounds like an interesting little tidbit that was tucked away, so I'm looking forward to this.
And this is Crystal. She introduced herself before y'all got here. I got my family support here. Okay, well, if anybody else hops in, we will ask them to introduce themselves too. So this, as I mentioned, there's a study guide. It's up on the website, so I can share it afterwards, especially if folks want to share their email, or you can just look it up. It's pretty easy to find. But the authors have put together this purpose that I'm just going to share because I thought it could also double as a purpose for this study. And it says, the purpose of this study guide is to provide an opportunity for deeper knowledge and understanding of the legacy of the Afro-Christian Convention as the fifth founding stream of the United Church of Christ and how it widens and deepens our commitment and vision as a denomination and as a church. Is this thing blocking? Oops, sorry. Let's just move it. Okay, thank you. That's better. An underlying theme running through this book is Ubuntu. The Ngugi Bantu term means humanity towards others. It is understood more fully through the phrase, I am because we are, since we are, and therefore I am. This understanding of individuals and communities produces the values of respect, dignity, compassion, co-responsibility, personhood, and justice. Within the legacy of the Afro-Christian tradition, it is the African taproot that defines the kinship ties of the beloved community that resonated with the united and uniting ideal of the United Church of Christ. It is through the lens of Ubuntu, revealed in the story of the fifth founding stream, that this study guide for Afro-Christian Convention, the fifth stream of the United Church of Christ, explores forms of consciousness experienced by Afro-Christians that continue to offer important points of reflection today. As a community of faith, Ubuntu guides our journey toward greater awareness and responsiveness in our work and fellowship. So I think I should probably mention that right now we have scheduled 2 sessions. The study guide has 8 modules. And so we're kind of just testing the waters a little bit to see, gauge how much interest there is. I think we're displacing the Girl Scouts from the meeting in this room tonight too. So I feel a little bit bad about that. So right now things are kind of in flux. But for right now, we have 2 sessions set aside. We just introduced ourselves. So I don't know if you're planning on joining us. If not, feel free. But if you want to introduce yourself, we'd be glad to have you with us.
My name is Alfred Shine. I'm a member here and don't really know what's going on.
We're doing a book there's this book that just came out. We're just going to talk about it. And so in honor of Black History Month, we're looking at the Afro-Christian Convention, which is now recognized as the 5th stream of the United Church of Christ. So that's what this is about. So let me see if there's anything I forgot to mention. Okay, oops. So just a little bit about the book. It was edited by the Reverend Yvonne V. Delk, who comes out of the Afro-Christian tradition. Her home church is one of these churches that was originally part of the Afro-Christian Convention in Virginia, I believe, and now is an elder. She holds all kinds of positions. There's a long bio of her. In fact, all the contributors to the book are biographies here at the end, little blurbs about each one of them. And the foreword is by Reverend Jeremiah Wright, which may sound familiar to some of you, anybody? When he was the pastor of the Trinity UCC in Chicago, the south side of Chicago, for like 35 years, and the congregation really blossomed under his leadership. He became a point of controversy during Obama's first campaign because he had some, like here they record the sermons and stuff like that, and so he had some statements about U.S. foreign policy and about the U.S. in general that were really kind of criticized. We're critical of they're very critical. And so, he comes out of that prophetic tradition that is not afraid of speaking truth to power. So his name was dragged through the mud, and it was kind of attempted to be a takedown of Obama himself before he was elected. So, I think that's when he kind of came into national consciousness. But I think within the tradition, he's been well known since long before that. So he wrote the foreword, and he's mentioned here and there in the book. Like I said, he was just published last year by the United Church Press, which is the UCC's publication house. It's got the foreword, of course. It's also got 10 essays, 3 appendices. So it's got some historical documents from the tradition. It's also got extensive notes, the bibliography, and an index. But despite that, it's pretty thin. So if you're thinking about getting it, which I should mention, Pastor Jacob said that the church could probably order a couple of copies if folks are interested. And mine came pretty quick, so maybe we could get it in time for the next week when I order mine. And I think if we do a bulk order, we also get a discount. But and there's one of the themes that you can see throughout the book is this theme of flowing. And I just want to read some of the chapter names The introduction is flowing from Africa, flowing from the Christian movement, flowing from Hush Harbors as an independent church. So basically every chapter takes up this theme of flowing somehow or other. Sorry, I have notes here on a different screen. The other thing I want to mention, I'm not sure if maybe some of you have read this one, The Hidden Histories in the United Church of Christ. This is now 2 volumes. This came out in 1984. So the second chapter of this book is, which I just started reading, I haven't finished it yet. It's called The Afro-Christian Connection. And so this is the attempt of authors and historians of the denomination to bring forth some of the histories that have not been part of the mainstream histories. The Afro-Christian Connection by Purcell O. Alston. And so it's about specifically the Afro-Christian Convention. This is 15 pages, just 1 chapter. Now this book is greatly expanded. So I want to mention that too. Aside from history, because actually this is categorized as a work of history, it also touches on the themes of slavery and abolition. Of course, education is a big theme. Missions, not just internal missions of the UCC, the white UCC into the US South, but also missions abroad that were taken up by this particular denomination before it got folded into the UCC, mostly into the Caribbean, but also into Africa. Civil rights, the anti-death penalty struggle, the environmental justice struggle, which yesterday the national denomination had a webinar highlighting unsung heroes from the environmental justice movement, all African-American fighters. And it was very interesting to see that brought back up. And it was one of the speakers was Dr. Robert Bullard, who wrote this book, Confronting Environmental Racism. He is credited with coining the term environmental racism. So this is very, very interesting connection. And they also did it in honor of Black History Month. It's on the website now too. And theology, of course. So hopefully we can get into a little bit of the theology too. Another interesting thing about this book is that it's rooted in Africa and is told from the Black perspective. It's told from an insider's perspective. And there's a little asterisk because 1 chapter is written by a white brother. He's a historian of the church, and his name is, I forget his name, Richard Taylor. But aside from that, all the other chapters are written by African Americans. And so they're kind of telling, they also always share a little bit, their authors, about their own personal experience. So in that sense, it's very different from, for example, this other book that I just read. I read this one, and I bring it up because it's an interesting comparison. This is called A Separate Canaan, the making of an Afro-Moravian world in North Carolina, 1763 to 1840. My sister and I grew up in the Moravian church. We used to go to Moravian church in Covina. And so for me, that was an important part of my formation, especially since I got to go to their youth camp when I was like 10 years old. And when I was there, I stayed with some African-American families. Well, they were actually immigrants from Guyana, so Afro-Caribbean. And for me, it was formative. And so this book is about basically the Moravian Church in the South and their holding slaves and how they engaged with slaveholding and how they seated churches and stuff like that. So, but it's written by a white brother, and so he has a very different approach, kind of an outsider's perspective. So for me, it offers a little bit of a contrast. And like I mentioned, the authors of this book put together this 8-module study guide that includes recommended Bible verses, which I've included in this guide. It's got discussion questions, additional resources. They have links to videos. They have some songs. So this is helpful, especially if you decide to continue, with this study group. So I want to share a quote from the foreword that kind of ties together some of these themes that are highlighted. This is by Jeremiah Wright, from the foreword by Reverend Wright. The struggle for African Americans to be free in the United States of America does not begin in 1619. It does not begin with the transatlantic slave trade. It does not begin with the Africans who first circumnavigated the globe 1,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. That struggle to be free, to be recognized as human, begins deep in the belly of Africa and flows as a river fed by many streams well into the 20th century. The river is the same river that produced the Afro-Christian Convention and feeds the fifth stream of our beloved United Church of Christ. So I like that quote because it kind of ties together some of the themes that we mentioned, coming from a kind of an Afrocentric perspective, and also this theme of flowing in a river. And this next slide is about why we're talking about the fifth stream. Why is it called the fifth stream? So I put together this little diagram to kind of help us understand, because I myself tend to be much more interested in history than in theology or philosophy, except in as much as how the way people's or groups' theologies or philosophies or thinking about things influence the decisions they make and contribute to history. So to me, it kind of helps map out like, okay, what are we talking about? Especially for people that are maybe new to the denomination or haven't really had a chance to study it yet. So the UCC was, as a denomination, formed in 1957, which is actually fairly recent. And it, in June or something of 1957 was when the traditional history, the mainstream history, has talked about as four streams came together and united. This is part of this united and uniting tradition that goes back further than that. Those four streams, as you can see in the diagram, were the Evangelical Synod and the Reformed Church, which are both denominations made up by the descendants of German immigrants, basically German Calvinists. And these two, the Evangelicals and the Reformed Church, came together in 1934 to form the Evangelical and Reformed Church. And this other two streams are the Congregational Church, which is the Puritans, the Pilgrims that I think that we know the stories about, with the buckle hats, and that were had the Thanksgiving and burned witches and stuff like that, and went on to form other congregational churches in other places here, especially here in the United States. Basically New Englanders from England. And that's like, that's kind of pretty much the predominant kind of stream even today within the UCC. And so that was one that came together in 1931 and who they came together in 1931 with was this church called the Christian Church. And the Christian Church, it comes out of the Second Great Awakening, which was basically folks who had moved into the interior of the continent, away from the shores, very shortly after, the beginning of the colonization, and that the writers talk about how, like, living on the frontier, they really wanted to get away from denominationalism. Like, there were Presbyterians, there were Methodists, there were Anglicans, and they wanted to have a kind of a more direct, I guess, and experience of religion. And so they wanted to shed labels, and so they just called themselves a Christian church. And they also wanted to have a very democratic structure within their churches. So what we now know as the Afro-Christian Convention also comes out of that movement in the South, where African Americans too were basically along that same trajectory of having autonomous churches. They were there was some fraternalism, probably more paternalism from some of the leaders of this Christian church, but eventually they had a lot of autonomy, and were popping up in Virginia, North Carolina, into Kentucky. So that's why this diagram is like this, because, like I said, for a long time, the Afro-Christian Convention was not acknowledged as one of the streams, which is why it flows into the river metaphor. But after the Congregational Church and the Christian Church came together in 1931, over a period of time, the a structure basically called the Convention of South was put together, through which the Black congregational churches in the South came together with the Afro-Christian Convention churches to form the Convention of the South. So that's kind of why it wasn't, I mean, obviously because of racism too, but the Afro-Christian Convention was kind of subsumed into the Convention of the South, which was kind of considered basically Black congregationalism. And so it was more seen as like a subset of the congregational churches in 1957 when these streams came together. So just a little bit of historical background. I hope the diagram helps a little bit, but just kind of a quick, I mean, yeah, because they get into a lot more detail, especially in the historical chapters. It helps? Okay, good. Okay. And just another diagram, because like I said, for me, it's helpful. Hopefully it's helpful for you too. So the diagram starts in 1619, which is when the first enslaved individuals from Africa were brought, and they came to the Tidewater region, which is where the Afro-Christian Convention and its congregations got started. And to contrast with the Pilgrims, these Congregationalists from England by way of the Netherlands, land in Plymouth Rock. So actually, if in some ways the Afro-Christian tradition is even older than the Congregationalist or white Congregationalist tradition up in New England. In 1785, the Congregationalists ordained their first Black pastor. And I don't know if you saw the devotion, the video devotion from last week, when the pastors gave a shout out to this study, the study group. But they mentioned Lemuel Thompson, I think was his name, being the first African-American ordained by the Congregationalist denomination in Connecticut. So it's not the same tradition. It's not the Afro-Christian Convention tradition. It comes out of white Puritan, Congregationalism, but is one of their ways of opening up to not just African Americans, but also to leadership for African Americans within the denomination or within the tradition, because I don't think they were technically a denomination yet. Also, relatively early on are these Cane Ridge revivals, which is part of the Second Great Awakening that I was mentioning earlier. And this is where the first Afro-Christian congregations start being formed in that Tidewater region. Jumping up a little bit ahead in 1846, that's when the Congregationalists in the North, mostly in New England, they put together a missionary society, and they start sending missions to the US South to try to influence white Christianity in the South, but also to reach out to the African American community. But this is building up this other stream of Black Congregationalism. So there was, right after that, there was the African Christian congregations start forming conferences, like regional conferences, and they do that for basically like 50 years until 1892, which is when the congregations from this Christian church tradition basically consolidate to form the Afro-Christian Convention. That's really where we get the term, the Afro-Christian Convention, from in 1892. So very early on. Jumping ahead a little bit, about 50 years or so, is the Convention of the South. This is when I mentioned that the Black congregational churches, because they were segregated, came together with the Afro-Christian Convention. And they were kind of governed as part of the Congregationalist denomination. And then 7 years later is when the UCC itself forms and kind of excludes or writes the Afro-Christian Convention out of their own history and founding documents, even though their intention, they say they're integrationist. And then it wasn't until last year, like I mentioned, that the UCC, as a polity, recognizes the Afro-Christian Convention officially as a fifth stream. They also, have some language in there. I don't know if it was a resolution, something like that they passed, that they're going to do everything they can to promote the study of this book. And so hopefully what we do here can contribute to that. And just so you know where we're talking about, the Tidewater region is basically this area. It's pretty much the coastal area around the Chesapeake Bay. Most of these congregations that we're talking about in the early days are in Virginia, which is this one, and North Carolina, especially North Carolina, which is this one down here. And North Carolina is where this other book that I read took place. So that's another reason why it was an interesting comparison. There's some in Maryland. So this is the Chesapeake Bay. And it also mentions some in Kentucky, which is obviously further inland. So I wanted to share a couple of quotes that I thought could help lead into a little bit of a discussion. This is from the first page after the foreword. And this is by Yvonne Delk. And she writes that she has an epigraph from James Weldon Johnson, who was writing like in about 1900 or so. And then she's writing about this quote. She says, that she uses for epigraph. James Weldon Johnson put pen to paper, calling African people to never forget their story, their journey, and the place where they first met the divine. So where was that place where they first met the divine? Do you think? It was in Africa. This is highlighting how it's kind of a centering Africa and African spirituality in the approach of this book. And the other quote that I wanted to share, this is from the writer is K. Ray Hill. On page 63, he says, "Our theology was not born in slavery. It was tested in slavery. Our theology emerges from a belief system that began in Africa." So these are just two quotes that I pulled out to highlight that theme that is running through the book. How are we doing on time? Okay. So like I mentioned, the authors of the study guide, which are the same people as the authors of the book, they recommend these Bible verses to accompany ours. Well, they recommend it for the first study, which is actually about the foreword, the first chapter and the last chapter. But I thought they were good too for some of the things that I was hoping to bring out today. Would somebody want to read the scripture out loud? So it's not just me talking the whole time? Thank you.
On the last day of the festival, the great day, while Jesus was standing there, he cried out, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me, and let the one who believes in me drink. As the scripture has said, out of the believer's heart shall flow rivers of living water." Now he said this about the Spirit, which believers in him were to receive. For as yet there was no Spirit, because Jesus was not yet glorified. John chapter 7, verses 37 to 39.
Thank you so much for reading. So that's basically what I had prepared, and I was hoping that just a little historical discussion and talking about some of the themes that we see in this book. Also, if there's any, also maybe thinking about how the Bible verse relates or potentially relates to this discussion, which is kind of a one-side discussion so far, but maybe we can open it up a little bit. What are we thinking? What are we feeling? Thoughts, reflections, questions? And let's open it up.
Are you worried about time?
No, not anymore.
Were you in the beginning?
Yeah.
I feel like you went through some stuff like that.
Okay.
I don't know. Do you have questions?
I'm gonna unshare the screen.
I was wondering about on the slide, the ninth slide, number 9.
Yeah.
When they were talking about how the theology emerged from a belief system began in Africa,
Mhm.
is it something like literally that it was culturally practiced and believed as part of their roots in different parts of Africa, or are they just saying has been in us the whole time?
Good question. I, based on my study, believe it's both.
Yeah.
This book is written by pastors, people of faith, people that take their belief, their faith, their tradition very seriously. And so I think, if you're coming to it from that approach, then it's very easy to feel like having a connection to the divine is natural and has always been there. And I think there's a lot of authentic. I think they're when they say that they're saying it in an authentic way. But there are also people that have done very serious study, not just of Christianity and the UCC and Protestantism and that sort of thing, but also going back, to indigenous African traditions. And again, this book gets into that. So does the other one. Um, Talking about how the concept of the divinity being present in the forces of nature, right? Like in the earth and the water and fire, stuff like that. Talking about traditions like of ancestor veneration and respect for the elders. They reference John and Beatty's African Religions and Philosophy, which I was looking for. I couldn't find it before I brought it in, but these are just some books from my collection that could also potentially enhance this discussion. I do have it, and I read it like years ago, but I was seeing those parallels too when they're talking about how basically how African American Christianity, Black Christianity is a little bit is different from white Christianity, and some of it is very clearly having come from that tradition that's directly from Africa. So I think it's both.
And then a lot of indigenous knowledge and beliefs are really about love and, and the finding the spiritual, right? And that's in the
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's why they highlight the concept of Ubuntu, which here they say it's a Bantu word. I've heard Ubuntu. Thank you. I've heard people say it's a Xhosa word from South Africa. Um, um, Nelson Mandela used to talk a lot about Ubuntu, and so did Desmond Tutu. And so I think, even Ram Karenga and the people that were kind of building up really a revolutionary approach to cultural nationalism, like during the revolutionary times of the 60s and 70s, creating Kwanzaa and stuff like that. They were bringing in Ubuntu and other tradition, concepts, philosophical, spiritual concepts that are rooted in the continent. So yeah, I think that those are also themes that flow through the book.
And I used to live in South Africa.
No way.
But they also, like even after apartheid, even with the Truth and Reconciliation, they said there's no way people could have gotten past like the violence against one another if they didn't have that belief system. They said there's no way it would have worked.
Mm.
So it was a belief, but they really demonstrated that practice to move on in the country, and to start healing. So I think it's just so embedded in so much of what they do and did that it's just, I don't know, it's so deeply ingrained.
That's really interesting. Crystal is mentioning. Can you hear? Marina, are you still here? Oh, are we still on?
Did you stop the photo?
Can you hear the people that are in the room, Marina? That's fine. Just in case for the recording, Crystal is mentioning how she used to live in South Africa, and people there talk about how Ubuntu and their spiritual practices helped them get through the truth and reconciliation process after apartheid and kind of help put it into the violence there. And I think that's fascinating because Guatemala also went through a truth and reconciliation process, and they don't really have as strong of a tradition of African spirituality. There are, Afro-Guatemalans, the Garifuna people there, but they're a very small minority. And they're also not really fully integrated into the society. They're very marginalized. And the violence in Guatemala after the 1996 peace accords has really continued despite the internal armed conflict, quote unquote, technically being over. So I wonder if that it can provide us a contrast, about how, spiritual concepts or practices, inform like large scale peace and war processes. My sister and I have both, more her than me, but she's spent a lot of time and done a lot of work in Guatemala, in the women's movement and the feminist movement, also focused on violence there. So yeah, that's really, really interesting.
You talked about me.
So this acknowledgement came out in 2022, and this book came out last year. How did you come about it? How did you get exposed to it? Because yeah, it's like, I don't know, this was just like something a little bit newer concept to me. So how did you come about it?
Yeah, so I might have mentioned it before, right before you walked in, but I was sharing the story of how I went to the new member class and Jacob invited me to join as a member. I was like, well, hold on, I need to learn a little bit more about UCC before I make a commitment like that. And so basically, I just started looking on the web, and looking through the books I already had and stuff like that. And I saw that the denomination has an editorial house, a book publishing house, and I was like, this is going to be a great resource to learn. And one of the first things that pops up on the website is this one because it was brand new, and I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And I don't really know anything. I only know about the Pilgrims, right? I didn't even know about the Germans and the Evangelical and Reformed, the Christian Church down in the South. I didn't really know about any of that. But this one looked the most interesting. I was telling Crystal that, Christy, I'm so sorry. First time we meet. That a lot of times when I do research, I do it backwards. I'm more interested in like the marginal histories than I am in like the mainstream histories. It's like, oh, this is perfect. But it's an entryway. It's a way in to learning more, and especially with the bibliography and everything. So I was like, I want to learn more about this particular denomination. This book looks really interesting. It ties into my study of Black history. I had also pretty much ever since my partner got pregnant, been studying religion and spirituality, kind of trying to do some soul searching, trying to figure out how I want to raise my son and trying to figure out what to name him and all that stuff. So I started looking into my own story, my own history. And that's why I was researching more the Moravian church, was also researching, astrology and indigenous, like the Mesoamerican, pre-colonial religion, from before before the conquest, obviously, especially the calendar. So it's, part of the general history of a general study of religion, spirituality, kind of also trying to inform my own practice and my decisions, really. So that's kind of where it came from me, for me.
I have another question about the timeline.
Yeah.
So, and I also was wondering because a lot of African churches are really a lot more conservative. So I was wondering if, like, I was trying to think of like the ending of slavery in this timeline to see how that fits in this.
Yeah.
And then I was also just wondering how that, like, is the UCC church just different? Are they less conservative because of the UCC? But again, I don't know much about the denomination. I'm new to it.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if any of that came up. Because I think it's different than what I experienced here in this church.
Huh. Yeah, good question. The question is about basically where churches lie on the political spectrum, whether African American churches or the UCC or other congregational churches. Yeah, good question. So there one important date that did not get highlighted. If I was going to do a bigger timeline, it would have Civil War on it. But as far as this study goes, 1867 is an important date for the Afro-Christian Convention. In the post-war context, the post-Civil War context of basically a lot of the African American worship, Christian worship, prior to that time had been in the balconies of the white churches. So it was segregated, but it was in those same white churches. And so what Yvonne Delk says is 1867 marks the time when Black Christians came out of the balconies and basically started setting up their own. They already had, obviously, because we have these earlier dates, it's like the 1801 dates. But those were, what the book talks about is how any gathering of African Americans, especially in the South, was really viewed with suspicion because of the fear of slave rebellions. And those would also go on my timeline too. When was Nat Turner's rebellion? When was Denmark Vesey's rebellion? Because those also happened in the same area. Nat Turner's was in Virginia, very close to the Tidewater area that we're talking about. Denmark Vesey's was in Charleston, South Carolina. And that's actually out of the AME Church. They were doing their organizing in, they call it Mother Emanuel, the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. So there's a very, intense connection between the struggle for freedom and also the institutions and the spirituality there too. So I think that's where it fits in. It's some of the early founders of the Christian church, the kind of trying to get rid of labels church, were anti-slavery, but the church as a whole was not. And so they had segregated congregations. The Congregationalists too had segregated congregations. Even after they ordained their first minister in 1785, shortly after that, they had like 47 African American congregations, but they were segregated. So, and that was even in the North, right? Even in the North. So there's a history of segregation even within what later became the UCC, within the Congregationalists. From what I understand, basically none of the white churches were abolitionists from the beginning. Even though there was abolitionist strains within them from way back. But like even the Quakers were slave owners, and the Quakers are really well known for being pioneers in the abolitionist movement. And they came out against slavery long before the Congregationalists that united to form basically a denomination did. Even though the Methodists too, they ended up getting involved in abolitionism later, much later than I thought, because I always thought that the Methodists, like, they're part of the abolitionist movement, and they were, but not from the very beginning. So I thought that was really interesting too. It doesn't really talk about that so much in this book, as far as the Methodists go, because it's just not about Methodism too much. The conservative Black churches, it's very interesting, right? Like Raphael Warnock, he's in the Congress now, he's in the Senate, and he's Baptist. And Dr. Martin Luther King is coming out of the Baptist church in Georgia, right, in Atlanta. Very deeply rooted in civil rights and equality and appreciation for the dignity of every individual, and anti-racist, but conservative on a lot of other issues like LGBT equality, for example, marriage equality. Southern Baptist are very, have that very bad reputation, and it's deserved because they're not open and affirming like the UCCs
I
are.
was gonna say that not all UCC churches are.
Yeah.
There's only a certain number out of the entire denomination that are actually open. So luckily do it.
Well, it's not luck, sir.
Like the denomination. So I used to, when I was in Ohio, I belonged to the Presbyterian church, and the Presbyterian split. So there are more like Presbyterian churches that were affirming and non-more like churches, but they're part of the same Presbyterian. So they get together, but they still were officially split.
Right. The Methodists was split also.
Yeah. So Zoe is, sorry. I was just going to add in for the people watching. Zoe is mentioning that not even all UCC churches are open and affirming. And Christy was mentioning how she used to go to a Presbyterian church, and there's split, but they're still sort of together over, if it's over gay marriage or was
They're still, yeah, it was.
over gay
yeah.
marriage?
And just even same-sex relationships in general. But the first vote for the United Methodists, they said, and I read the Unanimous, but I wasn't paying attention to the first vote, but what I heard was that it didn't pass because of the African churches, the Methodist African churches, skewed the vote for the first vote so that they can count it. So that's what my friend's niece is a pastor, Methodist pastor. So that's why I was curious about what's something new to the BCC. Yeah.
So Christy's just mentioning how in the Methodist Church, it was the African Methodist churches that skewed the vote, and which the first vote that ended up splitting the Methodist Church, which just happened recently, in the past couple of months. Yeah, and I think the UCC's, well, the thing about congregationalism is that the reason why the term congregational is used is because it's a organizational structure. Each congregation makes its own decisions, right? They don't follow any mandates from the national, conference or whatever. So not all congregational or congregationalist churches joined the UCC in 1957. So there's that. The only split that I know of over gay marriage was that the Puerto Rican Congregationalists split off and said, no, we're not going to have anything to do with this. When the UCC as a denomination, I'm not sure. I don't know what exactly the process was, but made a statement or passed a resolution or something like that. But each congregation has the ability to decide whether or not they're going to be open and affirming. And Zoe was saying, we're just lucky to go to one or be part of one. I think it's not luck. It's because people within the church said it is really important for us, our community here, to be open and affirming. And that is really what has been driving. One of my friends was part of the Methodist church down the street growing up. And she, as like a teenager, was instrumental in kind of pushing that congregation to being open and affirming. So it's the actions of the individuals within the congregations that create the policies and the environment that we're living in, worshiping in, or learning in. So I think it's not, I don't want to say it's not lucky, but
I don't know how old any of the other churches are that have been this year coming up this year being open.
Yeah, and see, I think there's a difference between people in the congregation being affirming and welcoming, and also having the theology support it.
Yeah.
So the Methodist Church, the theology did not support that, but people in the congregation, oh, you're welcome here. But actually, if your theology doesn't support that, not really, right? That's not affirming. Exactly. So I think that the change, the theology is important to really true inclusion and true affirmation. So I think that's a difference in the organized religious structure.
Absolutely. Christy's just mentioning how the theology supporting being welcoming is very important. She didn't have that in the Methodist Church. And I on that note, I just want to mention, as far as the United Church Press goes, Pilgrim Press goes, they have some really good resources on exactly how the theology it's not that, oh, this is what we think. It's rooted in the gospel, it's rooted in the Bible. And this, obviously we hear that from the pulpit too. But there is another book called Take Back the Word, which I got as part of my research. I haven't read it yet, but that's what it really focuses on. There's been some talks on the live stream too, and on the YouTube channel specifically about that. And I think you're right. I agree 100%. It's very important to understand why.
Yeah. And were you there for the 1946 project?
I didn't watch the film. Yeah. She asked me if I went to the 1948 film, but one of the talks that was part of adult education sometime last year really talked about a lot of those Bible verses and the exegesis of them.
It's very good. So again, it's like different interpretations of text, right? So even like in the Presbytery, it's like, well, we believe this and you all believe this, because it's the different perceptions of interpretation.
I didn't know that they split.
The Presbytery. My friends were pastors, so they were explaining.
I grew up Presbyterian, and I don't think
it was that It wasn't 50 years ago.
No, I was talking to my best friend about it also actually about how, she grew up in a Catholic chapel where it was very obvious that like you were not allowed to be gay. But I don't remember ever hearing that at church, like in the Presbyterian church growing up, and I never thought that. But then I know that like there are affirming churches like this one here in Claremont, it's affirming. They have a gay, the pastor is gay also at this one. But yeah, I didn't know that.
But I think that that's where we need to be careful, because even when they do their formal education classes, they have to teach the formal stuff. And I was going to church before I came to this one, just around the corner. So when I was doing the new members, like, yeah, we're affirming this and that. And then when they started preaching, I'm like, not so much,
We teach the kids like a very like, obviously like lower level, just saying like, every church you go to is welcoming, but they're not all accepting. Like that's all and that's what we tell them, right? It's like, when it comes down to it, there's so many churches that are like welcoming and yeah, this, and this, but like, but then they can't be in any type of leadership position as like someone who's queer, whatever, and like here, like, a lot of stuff. And it feels good, like, but I don't ever have to worry about it, or I don't even think about it, it's just, yeah. It's not exactly, we went off topic here.
No, not at all. That's the point of discussion.
Yeah.
Bringing our own experiences and thoughts, sharing. Totally. The study guide also recommends closing in prayer. So would you want to do a closing prayer?
No.
Come on, junior high ministry.
I know. I'm a youth director. Minister.
No pressure.
Oh my gosh, all right. I will end in prayer. Lord, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for the opportunity for Ben to come in and share his beautiful gift that he has of teaching with us. Thank you for allowing him to open our eyes and our hearts to the words that he has to share with us so that we can learn more about all of these wonderful things he has to say. And I hope that next week will be even more informative and more people will come to listen to the great things that are being shared. And thank you for this wonderful church and the open and affirmingness that it has, and for us to be here and welcome and loved here.
Amen. Thank you so much, sister.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting this together.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked. Marina says, not the Quakers. Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna turn off the recording.
Is it the same time next week?
Yes, same time next week, 6 o'clock Thursday evening. We're gonna try to cram as many of these as we can into Black History Month, but we have a saying in our house, every month is Black History Month.